Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from Consensus by CoinDesk in Austin, Texas. And joining me for this segment, we have Rowland Graus, who's the Director of Product Management over at Agoric. We're going to discuss enabling developers to rapidly build smart, safe contracts. It's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
It's really an engaged community here at Consensus, and we know how important fostering a community is. How do you keep the Agoric community of developers involved?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think if you look at the original development of the Ethereum community, it really is based on a nugget of just interesting technology, right? Like you can't sort of fake a developer community, you can't buy a developer community, they have to come naturally. And what we found at Agoric is that the more people dive into our actual technology and tech stack, the more they become evangelists. And I think that's where it starts, is you start with a core nugget of really, really interested developers, and then that expands from there and they can evangelize the tech for you.
And your most popular programming language is JavaScript.
Right.
And why do you use that particular language?
So JavaScript is the most popular programming language on the planet, and really what Agoric wants to do is allow many, many more developers to be able to build smart contracts rapidly and securely. So
this particular language allows it to be more safe. Let's say if you built it in another language, what's the advantage of using JavaScript?
Yeah, so if you look at the number of Solidity developers, which is the language used for Ethereum, it's in the tens to low hundreds of thousands of developers globally. JavaScript has 14 million developers. And so even if you think about it, if you're deploying a smart contract yourself, you might be able to take a year off to learn Solidity and do it, but then who are you going to hire? And what we found is that these protocols need to grow to tens to dozens of developers, and if you need to hire anybody, you need to be able to hire users of JavaScript.
Right. What's the vision of the company moving forward for Agoric?
At a high level, really what Agoric wants to do is enable a world where there's vastly more cooperation through open and robust smart contracts. And that's the reason that we picked JavaScript as a primary way to bring in developers, and we want to enable that cooperation globally.
Right. Any key themes that you're picking up at the conference here?
It's interesting to see how mainstream the interchain narrative is now. If you look back two years or so, I think consensus, most people here would think Ethereum was sort of the only chain that was going to exist. And I think now it's much more clear that yes, there are going to be additional chains that have other use cases, and there will be good interoperation between those chains. And that's been really interesting to see.
And that is interesting because a big theme that we've been covering on the show here is interoperability, where these technologies are not necessarily operating in silos anymore.
Yep.
So, for my own knowledge, is it better or worse when you talk about, I can use Ethereum, I can use that, or is it just because there's different use cases associated with them?
I think what you'll find is that tech teams are looking at the trade-offs, right? They're trying to say, okay, if I want to deploy on Ethereum, there's a certain set of use cases where that makes a ton of sense. There's a certain use case or set of use cases where it doesn't. And so Agoric exists in the Cosmos community, which is really about multiple chains interoperating and developers maybe deploying their own chain, which, as use cases get built out, you'll find that there's going to be a vastly large number of different use cases that need their own chains.
Right, and on a high level, there's a chill in the air, if you will. Everyone's talking about the crypto winter again. For those of us that have been involved in the space a little bit longer, we have seen these ups and downs before.
Yes, and I think what's really different, when you look back to 2018, 2019, there weren't products that were out. There weren't use cases that had hit product market fit. And so when the prices declined, the question was really, is this stuff usable? Like, is this ever going to come back?
Right.
And I think that existential question is gone, right? We have, products are still getting deployed even though it's a bear market, right? And so, if you look at the fundamentals, how many users, how many use cases, how many developers, that stuff is still going to be up and to the right, regardless of what prices do in the near term.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at just the past 2 years, and of course there's been an influx, certainly confluence of the perfect storm going on in the past couple of years, but it seems to be in those 2 years as we've learned to live digitally, we had to make that pivot. I feel as if you're seeing use cases even accelerate more because the average investor, the average person is starting to understand what this is and how it's empowering and enabling the digital world and the future of the digital world.
Yeah, I think that changes that may have taken 10 years without the pandemic just got accelerated, right? And so we're starting to pull more of our lives online, and that brings in more use cases for this kind of technology for sure.
All right, Rowland, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks for having me.
All right.